So you've probably heard about, in history, you've probably heard about the brown shirts and the Night of the Long Knives. And for anybody who's interested in history in relation to Nazism and fascism, the Night of the Long Knives is an example of how when fascists get into power, how anyone who helped them get into power ends up on the chopping block. Ernst Röhm was head of the SA, which was the brown shirts, and the brown shirts used to go around interrupting any leftist gatherings. They were very brutal, and they would destroy buildings. They would round people up and brutalize them and kill them. They were brutal and racist and homophobic and all the rest that you could imagine. That's what the brown shirts were. They were an expression of the Nazi Party at the time. They were an expression of unbridled power, that power was going to end up being fascist, and all the 14 characteristics of fascism were there along the way. And then Hitler decided around 1934 that the SA, headed by Ernst Röhm, I think that's his correct name, had too much power, and even though they'd helped Hitler rise to power, they were a threat to his power. And so at the Night of the Long Knives, what happened was Hitler organized for hundreds of political opponents and hundreds of the people from the brown shirts to be executed. And he made up excuses. They were very feeble excuses, but that's what he did to rid his opponents and rid any threat to his consolidation of power. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because I think there's a lot of white nationalists who think that they are Trump's brown shirts in a way. For example, the child with the green shirt and the blue gloves who went out and shot some leftist protesters and thought that he was doing something good for his country. I don't believe that. I'm not even sure if he believed it. I think people use that cover of, we're trying to protect property, we're trying to stop looters, the awful ratbaggers, the awful socialist, leftist, non-Americans. We're trying to stop them because they're stopping us from having the wonderful white America where white people are supreme. That white supremacist dream, really, of making America great again. Meaning, that's just code for making America where a certain group of people with a certain skin color are the supreme rulers of that country. Now, I'm not saying Trump is responsible for that position, because all the ruling class, both parties, the Democratic Party and the GOP, are all propping up the 14 characteristics of fascism with their awful policies. Trump is just worse because he is the mask pulled off of this budding fascism. And along with that, he's encouraging people who are his base to become his brown shirts, to be his brown shirts. And people are willingly taking up that mantle. One only has to see in the comment section on social media these non-thinking people taking up that mantle, thinking that somehow Trump is on their side and cares about them, and that all they have to do is help him get into power and stay in power, maybe even beyond 2024. They will actually get some kind of glow from the power, that they will benefit, because in fact they've already benefited just from being white. And wouldn't it be great to have a white nationalist fascist in power, and imagine how much they will benefit from that. These are all just deluded thoughts, really, because firstly, when you vote for either of the duopoly, you're voting against your own interests, because the oligarchy and the powers that be, the establishment and the US national security state, they do not care one iota if you ever get anything In fact, they would like to have their foot on your neck. Doesn't matter what color you are. They've already been doing that for a few hundred years to black people. Black people, by the way, built the country, really. The slavery actually helped capitalism in that country be what it is today, the slavery. Nobody acknowledges that. It's black people that made the country great. If you call it great. I'm sure they don't think it's great because of look at what it is to black people. It's a shite show, basically, of oppression and killing black people just because they're black. The police, state-sanctioned killing of black people. They're making America great again. It was never great. It was built on white supremacy and slavery, and it's broadened its horizons, and it's an imperialist terror, invading countries and overthrowing countries' governments, killing and assassinating leaders, putting in dictators. Anyway, I digress, but my point is, I get it that there are some folks who are racist and they like to blame other races. They like to blame black people, they like to blame people of color, they like to blame migrants, they like to blame asylum seekers, they like to blame trans people, they like to blame gay people. They talk about being pro-life but are totally for all wars. They're also not interested in giving any support to single mothers. In fact, many white nationalists want to see women back in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant like in the 50s. It's a very selfish position, really, so narrow. When the government is coming for you, the government has been coming for you, but it's just taken longer. They've already had their foot on the necks of black people, and you thought you could be exempt? Why would you be exempt? In the end, the government, people in power, are only interested in consolidating their own power. They're only interested in what's good for them. And what's good for them is having more power, having more money, and having people that they can lord it over. I mean, what fun would it be to have a lot of power and money if you couldn't point to other people and say, look at those losers. So the racist white nationalists, the white supremacists, the Proud Boys, the Boogaloos, the child in the green shirt with the blue gloves and the rifle, whose brain hasn't even formed properly yet, propping up these rapacious corporatists in power by thinking that one is going to be their brown shirts. How foolish can you be? How foolish can that teenager, that child in the green shirt that shot other young people who had a different position, a different political position, because that's what it is. It wasn't about looting. It wasn't about anything like that. He came from another state. He wasn't protecting his own property. He came from another state because he felt like shooting some people. Because instead of looking to the powers that be that are the problem, he'd rather turn his attention to people that are different. People who have a different political position. For all the talk that I hear from white nationalists about freedom of speech and carrying on about freedom of speech, oh, isn't it awful that Alex Jones was deplatformed? Isn't it awful that this one and that one has been deplatformed? It's actually the left that gets silenced through algorithms, censorship, all sorts of things. But it's also that the people, that white nationalists, white supremacists, don't give a toss about the freedom of speech of leftists. They don't care at all. So that's a nonsense. The other nonsense is, it's not, if only white nationalists could be, or fascists, maybe we should just call them what they are, if only fascists could be truthful about this whole, I care about property, I care about protecting property, I care about looting, etc. like the Kenosha Guard. The Kenosha Guard is really just a bunch of white supremacist, Blue Lives Matter people propping up a racist, xenophobic power structure. That's all the Kenosha Guard is, really. And the police are in total cahoots with the likes of the Kenosha Guard. Totally. So for all this carrying on about freedom of speech and all the carrying on about, oh, we just came to Wisconsin to stop the looting, you know, we love America, all that crap. It's not really about that at all. And you can pretend all you like, leaving comments that it's the looters and this and that, trying to make out like that's what it is and that you're great Americans for propping up this rapacious end-stage capitalism that doesn't give a toss about you, really. I mean, how foolish can you be? But all this pretense is just a pretense, really. I would have more respect for people if they said, I just hate black people, I hate LGBT people, I hate migrants, I want a white society. I would have more respect. But no, just like with the whole marriage equality thing and people saying it's about the definition of marriage, they can't even be honest that they're just big fat homophobes, basically. Where is the honesty? Where is the honesty? There is none. People just have these thinly veiled excuses for the awful things that they do. Thinly veiled. So don't waste your time telling me how your little boy in the green shirt who shot that man directly in the chest, the one Anthony Huber, who was trying to protect other people, he's the hero. Your little green shirt boy with the gun who loves the police. I mean, what a fool. How foolish can you be? Loves the police. Just wanted to shoot people, basically. Telling me that he is some sort of hero. Yes, it's very heroic when you go into a crowd of people that have no weapons at all and start shooting them. Sounds like a coward to me. And when people were trying to take the gun off him, instead of dropping the gun and making it an equal fight, he shot that man point blank range in the chest. He shot Anthony Huber, who's a hero, for trying to take that gun away from a child. He's a hero. And the police commissioner of Kenosha wouldn't even acknowledge him and was actually propping up that whole narrative that these self-appointed vigilantes are, in a way, he was basically propping up the narrative that they're being helpful. The police are just an expression of white supremacy. They came from the militias that put down uprising slaves. They became the KKK, and then the KKK became the police. That's the bottom line, and that's why there are these protests. Because black people have had enough, and so they should have had enough. It's disgusting and disgraceful. It reminds me of how Palestinians are treated in apartheid Israel. So don't give me that crap about the little child in the green shirt with the gun being some sort of hero. He's a coward who's been completely indoctrinated by a stupid white supremacist, American exceptionalist nonsense. He's bought it, and now look at him. If there's justice, is there justice though? He's also a victim of this indoctrination. And when you are saying he's a hero, you are also a victim of that indoctrination. It's foolish because the people should be rising up against the powers that be, the totally dysfunctional state, this oppressive state. And instead, you think by being a brown shirt that somehow you're going to get the glow of power from these incredibly tosserish individuals that you're propping up, like Trump and whomever else. Biden is not much better. You think you're going to get some sort of a benefit from that? Really and truly, do you really think you're going to benefit from that? Look how the child in the green shirt is benefiting now in prison. One day, he's going to look back at that, most likely, and really regret it, what he did. I can guarantee at some point he's going to regret it. There's nothing heroic about shooting an unarmed man who's trying to remove a gun from you so you don't kill other people. Shooting him point blank range in the chest, absolutely ensuring that he is going to die, and then leaving him on the road bleeding to death. There's nothing heroic about that. Sounds like a cowardly action from someone who is completely indoctrinated into this racist, white supremacist position, that thinks that the left is somehow against them and is ruining America. Believe it or not, leftist ideas are actually going to benefit you. I know that's hard to swallow, but it's true. They're not just fighting for themselves, they're fighting for you too. And that's a fact. They include you in it, in their concern, even if you hate them through this bizarre lens that you're seeing them through. They're fighting for everybody. The common person. The everyday individual. That's who the left is fighting for. And fascism is against the people. So when you are propping up individuals, and it doesn't matter what party, when you're propping up individuals that are displaying the 14 characteristics of fascism in their policies, which is pretty much both sides the duopoly, you are propping up eventually an outcome that is going to be against your own interests, and you are actually voting against your own interests. Now that child, and I'm not giving him a name, that's why I call him the child in the green shirt, in the blue gloves, that had that gun, that shot those people, young people, whose lives are now gone, and has made a child fatherless. Anthony Huber had a child and a partner. Everybody loses. Everybody loses. Do you see what I'm saying? Everybody loses when you help prop up a position that is ultimately going to destroy you, your family, and everything that you have, the very little you have. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? And ultimately, just like the brown shirts and the night of the long knives, where they were executed by Hitler, just like them, that's what's going to happen to you. It may not actually be an execution when a fascist gets into power. It may be just throwing you in prison for the rest of your life. But it's probably, when fascism really gets into power, they just knock off anybody who is a threat to power. And that includes anybody that's helped them into power. So being a brown shirt for Trump or whomever else happens to be in the future, if it's Eric Prince or whomever else, is not going to be a benefit to you or anybody else. It'll only be a benefit to that person in power who's a fascist until you're not of any use anymore. And then it'll be goodbye. It'll be the end. Something to think about, isn't it? And if you just want to burn the village down, like that African proverb I mention every so often, where the child who's basically abandoned by the village will burn the village down to feel its warmth. I think that's the saying. If you just want to see it all be destroyed and burned down, what a waste of a precious life. What a waste of a precious life. Let's try and recognize the humanity in everybody and put aside these ridiculous, irrelevant criterion for what we think is morally important. For the people whom we think is morally important simply because of their appearance or their background. Let's try and put that aside and look at who are the real enemies. Who are the real enemies? They're not the black people or the LGBT people. They're not any of those people. They are the power structures that are putting you in the position of poverty, and all the people that you hate in the position of poverty and social inequality and struggling every single day to make ends meet. It's the the people in power that are doing that, not the people that you think you hate. And propping up the child in the green shirt as if he's some hero is just child abuse, basically. He was 17 and now he's killed 2 people and wounded somebody else, some others. Killed 2 people. And now, at some point, he's going to wake up to that, what he's done. And hopefully, unless he's a psychopath, hopefully he will regret that. And he'll have to live with that for the rest of his life. And he'll have a prison record. And what for? So that some people can pat him on the back and say, gee, you're a hero for killing unarmed people. Yeah, that's really heroic. I didn't think Anthony Hoover was doing anything. He was on his skateboard, going to a protest. So let's put aside all the feeble excuses as to why people are being little self-appointed vigilantes, propped up by the police. Let's put aside all these pretense and the excuses about protecting property, and just be honest and call it what it is. Just an excuse to exert power because you don't feel like you have any, and exerting power on people who don't have any either, and killing people because it's fun, because it makes you feel powerful. Let's call it what it is. Let's just be honest, shall we? I tire of people making all these phony excuses as to why people kill, why people do what they do. It gets tiresome, you know? Let's try and think things through, shall we? Otherwise, all I can say is RIP if you don't. Because the powers that be are coming for you. You must know that. They're coming for all of us because the oligarchy, the 1%, find us irrelevant, disposable. So let's stop with the I hate that group, I hate this group, they're the enemy, they're not American, all that nonsense. And try and think, what on earth am I doing?